Chapter 1: The Lost Man. David Carter sat quietly behind the wheel, his eyes fixed on the long road ahead. The sunset painted the sky in vibrant hues of orange, but inside him was an unfillable void. Skyscrapers, billion-dollar deals, and high-pressure meetings now felt like parts of a distant world he no longer wished to touch. For the past 10 years, David had built a real estate empire that everyone admired. His name appeared on the front pages of economic magazines, a golden man whom every investor wanted to collaborate with. But behind the glamour were endless family disputes. The most recent confrontation between him and his younger brother over control of the corporation had pushed everything to the brink of collapse. David no longer wanted to continue. His black sports car glided down the empty roads, leaving the bustling city behind. He had no idea where he was heading. He just needed to escape everything, at least for a while. Before he knew it, David found himself stopping in a small town called Seagrove, a place famous for its traditional pottery workshops. He parked the car and walked into the town. The town was peaceful, devoid of skyscrapers and dazzling lights. Only cobblestone streets, wooden houses, and small shops nestled against the hillside greeted him. Somehow David felt like he had found a place where he belonged. His eyes stopped at a small pottery workshop named Matthew's Ceramics. In front of it was an old sign, "Potter wanted, no experience needed." David stepped out of the car, standing before the old wooden door. Inside, the crackling sound of a kiln blended with the gentle hum of a spinning wheel. Strangely, this place felt familiar. Lily Harper, the owner of the workshop, was busy working on a flawed vase. Her fingers were coated in clay, and her brown hair, tied up in a messy bun, reflected the exhaustion of a long day. David stood silently for a moment, watching her. There was something about Lily that he couldn't look away from. Not her striking beauty, but the sincerity and determination in every movement she made. "Are you still hiring?" David's voice broke the silence. Lily looked up, her blue eyes staring at him. She paused, slightly startled. The man seemed familiar, but Lily couldn't recall where she had seen him before. "Do you have any pottery experience?" Lily asked, her eyes filled with doubt. David shook his head, smiling softly. "Not at all." Lily raised an eyebrow, sighing. "Then you'll be the worst apprentice I've ever hired." David shrugged, unfazed. "I learn fast." Lily was silent for a few seconds, then nodded. "If you're okay with low pay and getting your hands dirty, welcome aboard." David smiled, stepping fully into the workshop. He looked around, taking in the earthy scent of clay and the warm glow of the kiln. A sense of peace quietly seeped into his soul, something he hadn't felt during his years in the city. What Lily didn't know was, this wasn't their first meeting. David remembered Lily vividly. 5 years ago, on a stormy night, his car broke down by the side of the road. It was Lily who had stopped, helped him fix the car, and invited him to this very workshop to take shelter from the rain. But Lily had forgotten. David never forgot the girl with eyes that shimmered in the firelight, the one who helped him without expecting anything in return. And now, by chance, he had met her again, even though she didn't remember him. David approached the spinning wheel where Lily was shaping another vase. Quietly, he sat down beside her, ready to learn from scratch. And so, the journey of a millionaire stepping into the role of an apprentice began. A journey not only to seek peace, but to find the girl who had once unknowingly stepped into his life. Welcome to the Soul Stories channel. Today we bring you a meaningful tale. Let's listen together. Let us know which city you're tuning in from. Chapter 2: Faint Memories. Early the next morning, as the first rays of sunlight peeked through the dust-covered window, David arrived at Matthew's Ceramics. Lily was busy pulling tarps off stacks of freshly fired pottery, faint wisps of smoke lingering around the kiln. David entered with the clumsy demeanor of a newcomer. He wore an old shirt and faded jeans, his shoes still caked with mud from the night before. Lily glanced up, her eyes briefly meeting his before she gave a slight nod. "You're on time. Good. Come here. I'll show you a few basics." David stepped closer, silently observing her. Lily pulled out a large lump of clay from the wooden table and placed it onto the pottery wheel. Pottery isn't hard, but it requires patience. The key is to feel the clay beneath your hands. "It's alive," Lily said, placing her hands on the wheel and gently pressing the clay to start the spin. Her fingers glided over the smooth surface, shaping the clay into a forming vase. David nodded, sitting at the wheel beside her. He began following Lily's instructions, but the moment the wheel started spinning, the lump of clay suddenly flew off, landing across the floor in a long smear. Lily burst out laughing. "I've never seen anyone throw clay that far." David chuckled awkwardly, picking up the clay, his face slightly flushed. "Maybe I haven't quite felt what you're talking about yet." They tried again. This time David pressed too hard, and the forming vase collapsed, turning into a misshapen mess. "You're honestly the worst apprentice I've ever had," Lily said, hands on her hips, sighing. David shrugged, unfazed. "Maybe I just need more time." Lily looked at him, pursing her lips but saying nothing. Despite his lack of skill, there was something different about David, an unusual patience that most of her workers never had. In the following days, David continued working at the pottery workshop, and as Lily had predicted, he broke countless vases. "Don't press so hard, David," Lily shouted as the fifth vase of the day burst apart under his hands. David slowly lifted his hands, gazing at the shattered pieces. "Sorry, I think I messed up again." "There's no think about it. You definitely messed up," Lily scolded, but a small smile tugged at the corners of her lips. Each time David failed, Lily would gently guide his hands. Her fingers were small and cool but firm as they pressed against his. And without fail, every time ended with clay splattering somewhere or dropping to the floor, leaving them both laughing. That afternoon, as David struggled to shape a vase without it collapsing, Lily stood behind him, placing her hands over his, guiding each movement carefully. "Relax, don't be so stiff. Let it guide you," Lily whispered, her breath warm against David's neck. David tilted his head slightly, his eyes lingering on Lily's face. In the soft golden glow of the afternoon light, she looked peaceful and graceful. At that moment, David realized what he had known for a while. He wasn't just here for a temporary job. He had found a place he wanted to stay. That evening, after the workshop closed, David stayed behind to help Lily clean up. He carried leftover clay to the back and dumped it into the recycling bin. "You don't have to stay late like this," Lily said, noticing him still working outside. David shrugged. "I don't mind." Lily stood on the steps, watching him with a curious expression. "David, have I met you before?" Lily suddenly asked, squinting, as if trying to remember. David froze for a brief moment, his heart skipping a beat, but he quickly regained his composure. "Maybe we just crossed paths somewhere," David replied, avoiding her gaze. Lily didn't press further, but the strange feeling lingered in her mind. Late that night, David sat by the glowing kiln. He quietly watched the flickering orange light dance across the drying vases. Memories of that rainy night surfaced in his mind. She had forgotten, but he hadn't. David smiled softly. Even if she didn't remember, he would stay. Somewhere within the clay and warmth of the kiln, he believed their memories would be molded and reborn, shaped once again by his very hands. Chapter 3. When Feelings Begin to Bloom. Time passed, and David had been working at Matthew's Ceramics for over 3 weeks. From a clumsy beginner at the wheel, he gradually became accustomed to cleaning, preparing materials, and assisting Lily with various tasks around the workshop. However, the pottery wheel remained his greatest challenge. Despite his efforts, the vases he attempted to shape often ended up crooked or collapsed under his unskilled hands. At first, Lily saw him as just another apprentice, clumsy but persistent. Yet as days went by, she began to notice something different about David. One afternoon, while tidying up the workshop, Lily happened to catch David sitting quietly by the kiln, his eyes fixed intently on the flames. She stood at a distance, watching him, sensing a quiet stillness and a hint of loneliness in his gaze. When the sunset cast long shadows over the workshop roof, David would often help Lily carry stacks of finished pottery outside to dry. He never complained, even on days when clay covered his clothes and face, and it was in those simple, quiet moments that Lily began to feel something unfamiliar stir within her. Late one afternoon, as they arranged newly finished vases on the shelves, Lily noticed David watching her. "What is it?" Lily asked, still holding a vase, though her heart skipped slightly. David smiled softly, shaking his head. "You're really good at this. I've never seen anyone love their work as much as you do." Lily lowered her gaze, feeling the warmth of a blush rise to her cheeks. She quickly placed the vase on the shelf, trying to hide her shy smile. "Pottery is the only thing I know how to do," she replied, her voice quiet. David said nothing more, but the gentle smile lingered on his lips. As the sun dipped behind the distant trees, the two sat by the kiln, sipping warm tea Lily had brewed. The warmth filled the quiet space, accompanied only by the soft crackle of the fire inside the kiln. David gazed at the neatly arranged vases, the firelight reflecting on their glossy surfaces. "Lily, why did you decide to keep this workshop?" he asked, his voice calm and low. Lily was silent for a long moment. Her eyes followed the flickering flames, as if seeking distant memories within them. "My parents founded this workshop. They dedicated their lives to building it from a small room. I grew up surrounded by voices and the heat of the kiln. When they passed away, this workshop was the only thing I had left." Lily's voice trembled slightly. David didn't look away. "Then you won't lose it." Lily smiled faintly, but there was worry hidden within her expression. "I've tried, but it's getting harder. Larger workshops mass-produce using machines. Handcrafted pottery like mine is losing customers. The bank loans are piling up. I'm afraid that one day, I won't be able to continue." David looked at her for a long time, then gently placed his hand on her shoulder. "You won't lose it," he said, his voice steady. Lily felt the warmth from David's hand, and her heart quickened. She didn't understand why his presence brought her such unexpected comfort. That night after the workshop had closed, David and Lily sat on the porch, gazing at the pale moonlight that blanketed the small town. Lily held her teacup, her fingers tracing the rim as if she were deep in thought. "David," she spoke softly, breaking the peaceful silence between them. David turned to her, waiting for her to continue. "Did you really come here for work? I feel like you're different from the other apprentices." David hesitated, but a soft smile quickly formed on his lips. "Maybe I'm just a lost soul, and I happened to find this place and decided to stay." Lily looked at him, curiosity flickering in her eyes, but she chose not to press further. Somehow she sensed there was more to David's words than he let on, but she respected his privacy. "Well, whatever the reason, I'm glad you did," Lily said quietly, her gaze drifting up to the starry sky. David smiled, lifting his eyes to the vast night above. Under the moonlight, the small pottery workshop felt warm and peaceful, and in that moment, both of them realized that something between them was beginning to grow. Like the clay they molded each day, taking shape slowly but surely under their hands. Chapter 4. The Secret Revealed. Early in the morning, sunlight filtered through the curtains of Matthew's ceramics, casting a soft glow over the porcelain vases waiting to be fired in the kiln. Lily entered the workshop as she did every day, preparing for another long day of clay and fire. She sipped a hot cup of coffee, savoring the warmth and aroma that filled the quiet space. As Lily reviewed the workshop's financial records, a letter from the bank arrived. She quickly skimmed through its contents, but midway through, her eyes widened and her hands trembled slightly. "Your debt has been fully paid. Thank you for banking with us." Lily blinked several times, thinking she might have misread. She carefully reread each line, but the message remained unchanged. The workshop's debt had been cleared, an amount she never thought could be repaid so quickly. Setting the letter down, Lily immediately dialed the bank's number. "Hello, this is Lily Harper, owner of Matthew's Ceramics. I just received a notice that my debt has been fully paid, but I haven't made any payments. Is there some kind of mistake?" The banker on the other end paused briefly, checking her file. "Hello, Ms. Harper. According to our records, your debt was fully paid last week. However, we don't have any information regarding the payer. It may have been handled by a third party directly." Lily's breath caught. "A third party?" "Yes, ma'am, but I'm afraid the payer's information is confidential." Lily hung up, her mind swirling with questions. Who would pay off her debt without saying a word? She mentally ran through a list of friends and acquaintances, but no one she knew had the means to cover such a large sum. That evening, under a moonlit sky, the workshop lay still and quiet. Lily stood outside, the crisp night air cooling her skin. She leaned against the porch railing, gazing at the neatly stacked pottery drying in the courtyard. The workshop felt more peaceful than ever, but her thoughts lingered on the mysterious debt. As Lily drifted in thought, a deep voice echoed from behind the workshop. Yes, cancel the workshop's debt, but don't let her know. Lily froze, her breath hitching. She slowly stepped toward the voice, and under the dim light, she saw David standing there, phone in hand, his expression serious and careful. Her heart pounded as confusion and disbelief swept over her. She stepped closer, her voice trembling. David, what did you do? David turned around, momentarily surprised to see her, but instead of deflecting or hiding, he calmly put his phone away and met her gaze. I just wanted to help you, Lily. Lily took another step, now standing just a few feet away from him. Her eyes searched his face, trying to piece together what she had just heard. Who are you? Why would you pay my debt? David sighed, realizing there was no point in hiding the truth any longer. He took out his phone, opened a news article, and handed it to Lily. On the screen was an image of David, dressed in a sharp suit, standing in front of a skyscraper. The bold headline read, David Carter, real estate tycoon and founder of the Traditional Craft Preservation Fund. Chapter 5. The Past Resurfaces. Lily stood frozen, her gaze wavering as she stared at the news article on David's phone. The name David Carter wasn't the most shocking part. It was the realization that the man who had been working alongside her all this time was a real estate tycoon that left her heart tightening. You're David Carter? A real estate tycoon? Lily stammered, struggling to believe what she was seeing. David nodded slowly, his eyes steady and unwavering. You're a millionaire. Why are you working here like an apprentice? Lily's voice trembled, a mix of confusion and inexplicable hurt. David remained silent for a moment, as if carefully choosing his words. Finally, he stepped closer, his deep voice breaking the quiet stillness of the workshop. Don't you remember, Lily? Lily frowned, a flicker of familiarity sparking but remaining just out of reach. Remember what? David smiled softly, almost wistfully. 5 years ago, you helped me during a stormy night. Lily blinked, faint memories beginning to surface. My car broke down on the road just outside this town. I stood there for hours, drenched in the rain, trying to fix it, but with no luck. When I was close to giving up, an old car pulled over. You were the one who stepped out and helped me. Lily's breath caught as the fragmented images in her mind slowly pieced themselves together. The stormy night, the man stranded by the roadside. You brought me to the workshop to take shelter from the rain. We sat by the kiln, and you made me a cup of tea, telling me stories about your parents and the history of this place, David continued, his eyes softening as he looked at Lily. Her heart raced as the weight of his words settled over her. It was you, the man from that night, Lily whispered. David nodded. You didn't know who I was at the time. You didn't care. You helped me simply because I needed help. Lily turned away, unable to hold his gaze. Her mind swirled with emotions. So that's why you came back, to repay me, or out of pity. Her voice trembled, caught between disbelief and rising anger. David's expression faltered for a brief moment. He took another step closer, shrinking the space between them. No, Lily, I didn't come back to repay you. I happened to return to Seagrove when life felt overwhelming. When I passed by the workshop, I realized this was the place where you once helped me. It was all just a coincidence. Lily's eyes narrowed as she snapped her head toward him, hurt flashing across her face. A coincidence? She repeated, her voice strained. You're a millionaire, David. I don't believe in coincidences when it comes to people like you. David met her gaze, holding it steadily as he exhaled softly. Lily, I don't expect you to believe me right away. But I didn't stay here because of pity or obligation. I stayed because I wanted to. You're the first person who's made me feel at peace in a very long time. Lily lowered her head, her fingers tightening around the phone. I appreciate what you've done, but if you've already paid off my debt, I don't know how to respond. I don't want to feel like I owe you anything. It's not about owing me. David's voice was firm, cutting gently through her hesitation. This workshop is important to you. I just wanted to help preserve it, the same way you helped me that night, without asking for anything in return." Lily took a deep breath, blinking away the slight moisture forming in her eyes. She could feel the sincerity in David's words, but the confusion lingering in her heart refused to fade. "I'm grateful, David, but I need time to process all of this," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. David nodded, stepping back slightly as if to give her space. "I understand. I won't pressure you. Just know that I'll be here if you ever need me." Lily watched as David slowly walked out of the workshop, his figure disappearing into the soft glow of the evening light. Her mind raced, the memories of that rainy night more vivid than ever. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling of uncertainty. The vast difference between their worlds felt like an invisible barrier between them. Sitting down by the kiln, Lily absent-mindedly traced the rim of an unfinished vase, her thoughts tangled. She wasn't sure if she could accept David's help or the implications behind it. But one thing was certain: his presence had undeniably changed her life, leaving ripples that she couldn't ignore. Chapter 6. Happiness Beneath the Clay. After the night David confessed everything, Lily tried to keep her distance from him. She wasn't sure how she should feel. David was a millionaire, and she was just a woman running a small pottery workshop, struggling to preserve her parents' legacy. Their worlds were far too different. But no matter how hard she tried to avoid him, David's presence lingered in her thoughts. Every time Lily sat at the pottery wheel, she remembered David, clumsy but persistent, his fingers covered in clay. The sound of their laughter, echoing through the workshop when he ruined his fifth vase in one day, was still vivid in her mind. She realized David wasn't just a millionaire. He was a man willing to learn pottery just to be near her, even though nothing compelled him to do so. One morning, Lily entered the workshop as usual. The air inside was still, and the kiln was warm from the night before. Lily was about to start cleaning when she stopped abruptly. Sitting in the center of the pottery wheel was a misshapen ceramic vase. It was far from perfect, perhaps even ugly, but something about it caught her attention. As Lily stepped closer, she noticed delicate words etched onto its surface. "Thank you for helping me, and sorry for not saying it sooner." Lily chuckled. The vase was so poorly crafted that she immediately knew who had made it. "This vase is absolutely terrible," Lily remarked, though her voice carried unmistakable warmth. A familiar voice answered from behind her. "I know." Lily turned to see David leaning against the doorway. He wore a rolled-up shirt, traces of clay still lingering on his sleeves. David watched her, his expression a blend of hope and nervousness. Lily remained silent for a moment, glancing between David and the vase on the wheel. "But I'll keep it," she said softly, placing the vase on the shelf next to her other pieces, though it was clearly the ugliest of the collection. David smiled, relief flickering in his eyes. Lily stepped closer, the space between them narrowing until there were only a few steps left. She didn't speak. Instead, she gently placed her hand over his, giving it a light squeeze. This time, Lily didn't want to hide her feelings. "Thank you for staying," she whispered, looking directly at him. David pulled her closer, his touch tender and warm. Amid the soft glow of the kiln, they shared a gentle kiss. Here, where clay met fire, not only were vases born, but so was a love molded from sincerity and memories once thought forgotten. A few weeks later, Matthew's ceramics grew livelier. Tourists began visiting Seagrove after David's preservation fund invested in the town's development. Yet none of them knew that the fund's owner often had clay on his hands, working alongside Lily in the small workshop. Lily remained the heart of Matthew's ceramics, while David, despite his wealth, was still the worst apprentice she had ever had. But perhaps to Lily, he was the most special potter of all. Chapter 7. A Simple Proposal. One late afternoon, the golden light of sunset bathed the small pottery workshop. Lily sat at the pottery wheel, her hands gliding over the smooth clay. Across the room, David stood silently, watching her. At times, he wondered how different his life might have been if his car hadn't broken down that rainy night, leading him to meet this small but strong-willed woman. David slowly approached, holding a small wooden box he had spent the past week crafting. The box wasn't perfect, its edges slightly uneven, a mark of the clumsy potter he still was. "Lily, David's voice broke the quiet hum of the evening. Lily looked up, surprise flickering in her eyes. "What is it?" she asked, noticing the box in his hands. David didn't answer immediately. He set the box on the table, lifting the lid. Inside lay a simple ring with a small stone reflecting the soft glow of the sunset. "This ring isn't extravagant or flawless," David said softly, his gaze tender. "I didn't pick it from a fancy jewelry store. I made it myself, from the first piece of clay you taught me to shape." Lily froze, her fingers gently brushing the ring. "David, you!" David knelt on one knee, taking her hand in his. "I came here searching for peace, and I found it, with you. You've taught me that happiness doesn't lie in luxury, but in the simplest of things." Lily pressed her lips together, feeling her heart race so loudly she was sure he could hear it. "Will you marry me, Lily? Let's build a life together from clay, from the simple things we have." Tears shimmered in Lily's eyes. She nodded, unable to speak, overwhelmed with emotion. David gently slipped the ring onto her finger. As his hand brushed against hers, Lily felt a warmth spread through her, as if the world around them had paused, leaving only the two of them, wrapped in a moment filled with love. We'd love to hear your feedback. Leave a comment and let us know how you felt after watching the video. Your feedback is the motivation for us to continue bringing more meaningful stories. Chapter 8. A Kilnside Wedding. Matthew's ceramics glowed warmly on the day of Lily and David's wedding. It wasn't a lavish ceremony with silk-draped chairs or extravagant receptions. Instead, Lily chose to hold the wedding right inside the pottery workshop, where everything began. White ribbons adorned the corners of the workshop, and the ceramic vases that Lily and David had made together became centerpieces on simple tables. Friends from Seagrove and longtime potters arrived early to help Lily with the arrangements. David stood by the kiln, dressed in a modest suit. He adjusted his tie, feeling his hands tremble slightly. But as soon as Lily appeared in her simple white dress, all his nervousness melted away. She walked toward David, her eyes radiating love and warmth. The officiant stood before them, offering a gentle smile. "Today we gather to witness the union of two souls, David and Lily. No matter how life unfolds, love remains the simplest and most powerful force." David held Lily's hands tightly, his voice steady as he made his vow. "I promise to stand by you, no matter what life brings. I'll be the clumsiest potter you've ever had, but I'll also be the man who loves you the most." Lily laughed softly, tears of joy streaming down her cheeks. "And I promise," she replied, "no matter how many vases you break, I'll stand by you and help you make them again." Laughter filled the workshop from the guests gathered around them. As the officiant declared them husband and wife, David leaned down and kissed Lily, illuminated by the soft glow of the kiln behind them. That evening, beneath a sky full of stars, Lily and David sat by the kiln, just as they had on countless quiet nights before. Clay still speckled the pottery wheel, and Lily gently twisted the ring on her finger, smiling as she watched David shape another vase. "This one might not turn out lopsided," David said, though doubt lingered in his voice. Lily giggled. "Even if it does, I'll keep it." David looked up at her, his eyes filled with affection. "Why?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "Because it's yours, and because I love you." David softly took her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. The small pottery workshop continued to glow with light, where their love had been forged, molded, and became the most precious creation of all. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to hit like and share to spread the story to more people. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to never miss our latest videos. Thank you, and see you next time.